This is the Firefly X-Lite, and in my opinion, it is the best budget action camera on the market. And it has a lot going for itself. Not only is it lightweight, it shoots in 4K and has built-in image stabilization. Best part is, it comes in at 1/3 the price of a Hero 8, 9, or 10. But things evolve pretty quickly in the FPV community. So today we have a new camera in this small segment. So today we're taking a look at the RunCam Thumb, and at 1/3 the price of the Firefly X-Lite, we might have a compelling argument for a new king of budget action cameras. Okay, so here's the box right here, RunCam box, pretty straightforward, nothing fancy in here, just has RunCam on the front here, and on the side here, just some small information like the camera. It says 1080p camera, 60 frames per second. So nothing much on here, just one tab here. I have my unboxing knife. Let's get this thing open. Pretty cool. All right, so let's take a look and see what's inside here. All right, pretty cool. Small camera right here. It says thumb on it. Really tiny, guys. Wow. Put this to the side right here. And that's it. We have foam. Really good packaging, guys. An instruction manual. And below here, just that, we have some accessories. Pretty cool, we have a TPU mount for the camera. Now this costs a little bit extra. I did spring for this TPU mount here. I think it's like $5 extra or so, but that's an option when you select your camera. Besides that, you have all your accessories that come standard with the thumb camera. And that's it, nothing else. Let's see what's in this bag. Got a lot here. All right, so here's your mount that comes with the camera. It's a pretty sturdy mount, and hopefully we don't need this, but most of the smaller drones in the market has this adjustment anyway, so this hole right here, so no big deal. This looks like a sticker, a 3M sticker. That's pretty cool. Okay, so that's amazing. So if you, this is obviously a small camera for small drones. If you're flying a bigger drone, like a 3.5-inch drone, or maybe a 5-inch drone, you probably don't need a camera this light. But it's cool because not every drone is gonna have the mounting point for this. So there's some 3M double-side tip you can use to mount this to your smaller drone. Besides that, you have some other screws here, mounting screws, and I'm sure that's to mount this as well, and to put this together. This is your, I guess, your hold or part of that. Besides that, you have an ND filter. I think this is the ND16 filter, which is good for bright sunny days. And since we live in a bright climate here, this is gonna come in handy. That's pretty cool. They include that in the packaging here. Then you also have a USB-A to a micro USB plug. And I'm sure this is used for, I was gonna say charging, but this is used probably for firmware updates or transferring data from the actual camera to your computer. Man, this thing is super light. I already forgot how light it was. Pretty crazy. Last but not least, you have the power cable here. And this is very, very important. You're gonna use this wire to wire this straight to your flight controller. It does require a 5-volt source and nothing higher. So make sure you find a pad on your flight controller that provides 5 volts. All right, so let's get down to the camera here. This is the thumb camera, really surprisingly light, guys. And as I said before, the Firefly X-Lite is a really light camera between 34 and 38 grams. And that's the same weight of most naked action cameras like a naked GoPro or SMO 4K. But this thing is super, it feels like there's no components in here. It is plastic though. So first thing I know here is just the plastic material. It does feel kind of plasticky for sure, but that's good for weight savings. It has a simple thumb here, one button on here. I can see the lens here, and this is removable. So this is just a regular lens protector, which is good. And then here's your exposed lens. And it's also good because you can actually replace this and put on an ND filter that they included in here. So on bright sunny days, you can reduce your shutter speed or just prevent some vibration or jello in your footage. Coming to the back here, pretty straightforward as well. It just says RunCam, made in China, and it has the port here for your plug that we talked about earlier. Right here, it's pretty cool. We have a door here, and you would think that's the door for the battery. This does not have a battery. Why it's so light? But that's the actual access cover for your SD card. So it takes a micro SD card, maximum 128 gigs. Make sure it's a class 10 card. So I have one right here. I'm gonna put it in right now to see if it fits pretty good. Oh, okay. All right, put the cover back on there, and it's pretty nice and flush. Now, I did see some components in there. This thing is by no means water resistant or waterproof, so neither is your drone. So If you do crash in some water, then this thing is not protected. And talking about that, I can see clearly right here that there's some holes in here. So some ventilation holes, and that's pretty cool because once the drone is flying through the air, you will have some airflow going through here. All right, so before I power this up, let's talk about the specs so you know what you're paying for your hard-earned dollars. First thing here is the weight. Obviously, we talked about 9.8 grams, and that's significantly light. So this thing should fit on a multitude of drones. All right, so let's talk about the camera on here. This is a 1080p camera. Sorry, no 4K like the Firefly X-Lite, but 1080p is pretty good, especially for small analog drones. That's more than adequate. It is still HD, and it shoots at 60 frames per second. Now, if you do want stabilization on here, you can get a CSV file, but that will reduce your frame rate to 50 frames per second. Having said that, this records in the MP4 format, so just remember that if you need that format or you can't edit with that format. Besides that, this does have a 150-degree field of view, which is pretty decent, wide enough, but just remember that this will crop in a little bit if you have to put this in a stabilizer software. But just remember that when you're shooting or filming your subjects. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the power source on here. This requires 5 volts, and there's no battery in this camera, hence the reason why it's so light. That could be a positive and negative thing, but it requires a 5-volt source. We have this plug right here, and the power consumption is very low, around 280 milliamps. So it shouldn't draw too much power from your multiple cell battery, guys. All right, so let's try this thumb camera out and see how it works. No setup here required. The first thing here, just remove this screen protector. It looks really nice. And then put a SD card in here, or micro SD card. Make sure it's a class 10 and maximum is 128 gigs of memory. All we do now is just plug this up and see how this thing works. Now, you probably noticed here on the table that I have my harness right here, and I modified it. Normally what they want you to do is wire this straight to the flight controller, but because I'll be using this on multiple drones, I kind of made a harness for myself so I can use it on any drones. Another thing to do is just buy multiple of these harnesses, these small little wires here, and then just wire one for each quad. And that will have to be the case, especially for small drones like this right here. So to get around that, I use what I have here. This is like a converter from my Firefly X-Lite, pretty handy. I think iFlight also makes one of these, and this can convert the power from your multi-cell battery to a 5-volt source. That's pretty amazing, and that's what I'm gonna do here. So what I did was just cut the ends off and then put a connector on here so I can just swap it from drone to drone. And now I have a harness. I can just plug this into a multi-cell battery, and I have a 5-volt source here. So that is pretty amazing. Let's plug this in and see if this thing powers up. And look at that. All right, we have a solid red light, and that's pretty cool. That just means it's powered up. Doesn't mean it's recording yet. And to record, you just press the button once and it should flash. So let's see here. And there you go, it's flashing. So that means it's recording. So how does this look? I'm recording here on the RunCam thumb. I've done this also with my Firefly X-Lite in the past. And how's the image, guys? Obviously we have pretty decent light in the studio. And how's the audio? Because this thing does record audio. Is it pretty cool? No? Yes? How's the stabilization? You know, yeah, it is what it is. Here's my camera, here's what I'm recording on. Here's everything. So hopefully that turned out pretty good. And there's nothing else I can do with this. I can't switch this to another frame rate or to another resolution. It is what it is. This is it right here. So now to stop the recording, you just press the button one more time. And the recording has stopped, and now I'm back to a solid red light. So that's that, guys. No big deal there. Let's see if I can unplug this. Pretty cool. So this is great. I can run this on any of my drones now with this lead. So all I have to do is just stuff this in here and we should be good to go, and then go for our first flight with this. Now this is kind of tough. The fit is, it's tight. So that might be reason to use the other mounting solution here. And that looks really nice, guys. What do you think? Check this out, guys. That's pretty cool. The one thing I noticed here now with this case, or with this TPU mount, is that I can still access the SD card if I want to. So cool. All right, guys, so let's go outside. We're gonna take this camera for its first flight, see the performance. Depending on how bright it is, I might use the ND filter. So let's go outside and fly this thing. All right, guys, we're out here. Very nice day, very warm, but anyways, nice day, light winds between 5 and 7 miles an hour. Not much, but beautiful day nonetheless. So we're gonna start this up right now. I have it plugged in. Camera angle is similar to the FPV camera angle. I'm gonna try here first without the ND filter, then put the ND filter on my second flight and go from there. All right, let's do this. Okay, so we're back from our flight, and I've had some time to review the footage on the camera, and the RunCam thumb, the image isn't bad. Pretty decent, guys. All right, so some things to know here. First of all, I did a couple of flights, and I did a few flights with the ND filter off, and then some others with the ND filter on. So I will obviously annotate which one is which, so you can see the difference and see if there's any discernible difference in the two. The second thing is that I didn't do any color correction or any post stabilization. Everything you saw here or you did see was straight from the camera. The third thing is that I was flying this really early in the morning, which can also kind of simulate golden hour. So you'll see a lot of shadows in the video or images. You see a lot of shadows from the trees, a lot of shadows from objects like buildings and people. So just remember that when you're reviewing the footage. Okay, so let's get down to what I observed with this camera here. The first thing that jumped up was just the colors, how natural the colors look, meaning typically some cameras will have a lot of saturation, a lot of color in there, sometimes to the point where it looks kind of blotchy. But with this camera, to me, it seemed like the colors were a natural or an accurate representation of what I saw with my eyes, which is really good. And I also like this because I can go into my computer, my editing software, and also add saturation post-production after I do filming. Okay, the second thing I noticed was how bright the image was. I hit the play button and I looked at it and I was like, holy crap, this thing is very bright or vibrant. That could be a good or a bad thing. Now, we can't go into the camera here and change the settings. There's no manual settings to adjust the exposure or anything like that. It is what it is. It's an automatic exposure. And to be honest with you, it did a really good job with the speed of the exposure change. So if I went from a bright place to a dark place, it would change pretty snappy, pretty quickly, and in a smooth way, not too aggressive. Sometimes some older cameras, you'll see like a dark spot and then it will just go from dark to just bright all of a sudden. So this one adjusted pretty quickly, and that's pretty cool. Now the problem here though with this bright image is that to me, it was overexposed, just slightly overexposed. But multiple times you can see me flying around and then you can look at the sky, look at the ground. The ground is really well exposed, pretty good actually. You can see shadows and stuff, so it wasn't dark or contrasty by any means. But the sky was just completely blown out. Usually 12 o'clock, it's blown out, and then a little bit on the edges of the images, you will see some blue sky, which is okay, it's fine. But you know, compared to some of the other cameras, you get both sky and the ground being exposed properly. Okay, so as far as image resolution, this thing does appear to look like a 1080p image. It is a 1080p sensor. And I noticed that because sometimes when I'm flying, I can see some, I don't know, it looks kind of blotchy. You look at certain places, like when I pause the video, look at the homes, although the sharpness is there, the information isn't there. It's just kind of pixelated, I guess, kind of mushy. I also suspect this could be also caused due to the lower bitrate. I don't think this camera has a high bitrate. Yeah, it's kind of surprising. I wish it was higher. A bitrate can do a lot. You can have a 1080p resolution, and if your bitrate is high, then you have a lot of detail. Now, bitrate is just how much information is coming in from the camera and producing an image per a certain time, so per second. And it's true, I took a look at the file and the bitrate was around 20,000 kbs. It might create a smaller file to work with and to edit, and that's cool. But some of the other cameras, especially some of the other budget cameras, can do around 90 to 90,000 kbs, which is a lot more information in a small space of time. Yeah, and who knows why that's happening? In my opinion, I think it could be due to the processor on here. The more information you can process, the more you can take the information from your sensor and put it to the memory card, and then you have usually a cleaner image. So 1080p usually isn't the cause of mushy images or videos. It's usually because of the bitrate, because there are some really good 1080p cameras out there on the market. All right, now talking about processor and the ability to process information, another side effect of having a low processor is rolling shutter. And that's pretty big in the filming world. And rolling shutter is pretty much the inability for the processor to process the actual image fast enough, especially the image on the sensor. Now this is a very small sensor, obviously it's a small camera. Usually having a fast processor in your camera lets you read the sensor all at once at the same time. And the faster you can do that, the better your image. Now this isn't necessarily true in a static image. For example, I'm looking at my camera right here and the camera isn't moving. So there really isn't any movement there. But once you start to pan and tilt the camera, then you see a lot of artifacting or bending in the image. And that's because the processor is probably reading from top down. And by the time it gets to the bottom, the image has already moved. Why am I bringing this up, rolling shutter? You never hear that term in FPV. Well, it's the same thing as, I guess, jello. We see a lot of jello in FPV footage. So yes, there was a lot of jello in my footage and also some jitters, especially on my first flight. Now this can all be rectified and fixed with either a faster processor. In this case, you can also fix it with the ND filter. My first couple flights I did fly without the ND filter and there was a lot of jello. My next flight was with the ND filter and the image was surprisingly better. I mean, it was significantly better. I'm sure it would be better if you had even a higher ND filter on here. And that's gonna vary based upon your location. Obviously, if you're in a dark climate, maybe it's overcast and cloudy, then you might not even need a ND filter, but it's kind of bright outside here. So I could probably get away with the darker ND filter. So what's my conclusion on this camera and who is this for? Well, considering everything, guys, and the price of this, I think this camera is really great. This thing has a good place in the market. And why do I say that? Just look at the form factor, guys. This thing is very, very small. The name Thumb is a really good catchy name for this camera. And on top of that, it's very light, 9.8 grams. Whether it be the Insta360 Go 1 and 2 or the SMO 4K or even the naked GoPro, the next one is in the 30s as far as weight. So this thing is 1/3 the weight of those cameras. So despite the quality, and that's not even a deal breaker, the substantial weight savings on this is pretty cool, guys. But is this camera perfect? Not by any means, guys. We talked about it being overexposed, talked about the low bitrate on this. Now, as I said, those things aren't a deal breaker. And I guarantee you a lot of these things can be fixed or rectified with a software or a firmware update. Now, I wish there was an application that'd be even better, because if you had an app, you know, obviously there's no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on here, but you do have this micro SD port on here. But if there was an app for this, I could plug this into a computer or a phone and then obviously manually change my settings, whether it be exposure, color, saturations, even my shutter speed. And that would fix a lot of the problems that I'm talking about here today. So I do think they will support this. RunCam has a good reputation for sending upgrades. So we'll see if they update the firmware on this. And since this is a new product and a lot of people are looking for a light HD camera, I do think they will support this and give you some more updates. Hopefully, we'll see. Now, who is this camera for? I'd say a person like me, where I like to see a lot of competition in the market, and just making these products will put the pressure on other manufacturers to make a better product at a lower price. Now, you know, I saw this and I figured this thing cannot be 50 bucks. You know, I was really surprised when I saw the Firefly X-Lite and this thing was around 130 bucks, and that was a really surprising price. Now, this camera here is pretty impressive. It's also 4K, has stabilization in here. And this was really a shocker when I saw the price. And it's obviously true, because now you have companies like RunCam doing the same thing, and for 1/3 the price of the Firefly, they've done a lighter camera. The second person who might want this is a person who is a beginner, someone who is new into the market. And you know, just like me when I first started, it took me a while to buy this GoPro Hero 8, and I bought it when this was still relevant or still new. My point is, if you're a new or beginner pilot, you probably don't want to spend this much money on a camera, especially since it's not compatible with a lot of drones. Like, I can't put a Hero 8 or 9, 10 on this, you know, 3.5-inch drone, but you still want to have a camera with good resolution. So I think this will appeal to a lot of people who are just starting off and probably don't need the cinema, 8K, whatever, 4K, 6K, 120 frames per. They don't need all those high specs. I don't know, they want some kind of an image that's better than analog. And usually if you're a beginner pilot, you probably have an analog drone and the image isn't that great. I think this solves a lot of the problem. All right, the third and final person who might want this camera is a person who likes to fly a lot of micro or nano drones. I have this drone right here, and although we have like the Firefly X-Lite, this camera here is still too heavy for a drone of this size, 38 grams. In this case, we have this right here. This is the perfect weight, 9.8 grams. Even tiny whoops, small whoops, you can add this to it, and this wouldn't add much weight. There's no really significant penalty by adding this to a cine whoop or a tiny whoop. I know we have HD0 coming here in the near future, and that might be a solution to that. But for right now, 50 bucks, pretty cool, guys. Okay, so let me know what you think about the RunCam thumb camera, and hopefully this video helped you make a smart decision when it comes to purchasing either one of these or another action camera. And if you want to see how to stabilize the footage on this, or see a comparison between the Firefly X-Lite and the RunCam thumb camera, hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified whenever I do drop that video. Now, if you want to see a full review on the Firefly X-Lite, I've done a review on this. I'll leave it linked right here. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.